Hey everyone, that's my smooth beginning. Have you guys heard about the Adventures of Superman? It's starting digitally and will be, just like all of DC's digital first, be heading to print comics pretty shortly thereafter. Um, what's really interesting about this is, I mean, these are often just 10-page stories, but it's the lineup of people they have to take a whack at Superman. And also, it's the old Superman costume. It's the classic Superman with the underwear and everything. Um, the first issue came out today on a Tuesday, and it had writing by Jeff Parker and art by the amazing Chris Samney, one of my favorite artists currently. It was called Violent Minds. And next week will be Jeff Lemire as writer and artist. Then we're going to get Justin Jordan with Riley Rossmo and J.M. DeMatteis with Giuseppe Camuncoli and Sal Buscema. Interesting teaming there. And then, very interestingly, the fifth installment, will be by Joshua Hale Fialkov with art by Joel Jones. So Fialkov of iVampire fame and Joel Jones of Helheim. That should be really interesting. They've got Michael Avon Oeming, Matt Kint, and those are all the ones that are lined up so far, or that I'm seeing listed so far. So that's pretty exciting. This was the one that was going to have one issue by Orson Scott Card, who I think has been driven away by the controversy. A controversy which I still feel was a bit overblown by the press. I'm, as a science fiction fan, I'm sad not to be able to see what Orson Scott Card might have done. But anyway, I was thrilled to see them starting out with Chris Samney. I'm afraid that I think of Jeff Parker as kind of a flat writer, and I continue to think of him that way from this episode. You know, it was good enough to give us some cool Chris Samney art, but there weren't any layers to it or much of interest. And in fact, it felt, even though these are, as far as I know, just kind of one-shot stories, it felt at the end like this was just a first salvo involving a plot by Lex Luthor. So whether some other writer will pick up on the Lex Luthor thread that was started here, or whether it's just Jeff Parker's idea of a little ditty, it's still it's very exciting to see Chris Samney at work here. I'd love to see him do more Superman. I hope they ask him back. But he, if you worried, is he the right artist for Superman? He proves he can do Superman just as well as he can do Daredevil, or the Rocketeer. In fact, he does it very well. So I recommend it for the art. And the writing doesn't ruin the art. But future interesting writers coming up. So anyway, yeah. So that's one thing I just read today. And while we're on Superman, I've just finished Superman 19, the gatefold cover, which is by no means a WTF, because we knew Orion appeared throughout all of last Superman issue, and we know that a conflict is coming up with them. And that conflict does not happen in this issue anyway. It's postponed to the next issue. If there was any WTF, there was at the beginning, the first 5 pages of the story show Superman fighting against the Sunturians, which has no connection to what happened in the previous issue. It feels, I thought, I must have forgotten about the appearance of the Sunturians, because we're plunged into the middle of a scene with the Sunturians. But no, I went back and double checked. There was no. This has nothing to do with the previous issues' plot lines in any way. So it's just, I guess, meant to just be a little sequence showing us, a day in the life of Superman in a way. But it's done awkwardly, so it doesn't feel. It's not written with finesse. And so it feels like, oh, we've missed something. It doesn't feel like, here's a little day in the life of Superman. Even though that would segue nicely with the other third of the book is focused on a party at Lois Lane's house that Superman's late for because of that little adventure. And Diana Prince, his current girlfriend, Wonder Woman, shows up at the party without him. So the lack of finesse is the writer Scott Lobdell, I believe. I have not read a lot of Scott Lobdell, although something happened to me in my reading experience in the 90s where I decided he was a name to avoid, and I've been avoiding him in the New 52. But I've heard some good things about Superman, and there are a lot of good things in here, but the writing is clunky. The dialogue is always sort of on the nose. The most obvious thing, if it were the first time you were writing a superhero comic book, this was what you would have a superhero say. And there isn't a strong sense of character through dialogue or anything like that. And when there is character, it's just kind of over the top, like Jimmy Olsen being really silly or something. And but there is interesting stuff. Like, as I said, this seeing Wonder Woman at this party at Lois Lane's house is full of interesting stuff. It's just not done super well. And there's an interesting idea here with this kind of big-brained character who is warping reality in some way or giving people delusions in their head in some way. And he's in mind at the party and doing strange things to Clark Kent. Whether he's been doing strange things to everybody or just to Clark Kent, I don't know. I have a feeling we'll never really be clear on that because just the way the writer writes, there's just a lack of a lot of attention to getting the details just right. And speaking of details just right, this moment drives me crazy unless they've totally changed the character of Orion. He flies off and he asks the mother box, he says, "Mother box, be a sweetie. Take me to Hector Hammond's mind." Would Orion say be a sweetie? Would that word sweetie even exist in his vocabulary? He's kind of like a new god of rage and anger and battle. He's full of inner demons and monsters. He's the son of Darkseid. So, it just doesn't... It's kind of the prime example of lots of dialogue that just didn't click. But I will be back. There's enough interesting ideas here, and I want to see Orion and Superman fight. The artwork is very good, particularly in kind of fantastic kind of scenes. It seems a little more cheesy when we're at the party scene, with the hot chicks hugging Clark Kent and stuff. It almost seems like a different artist in the party scenes. I don't think Kenneth Rocafort was so comfortable in those scenes or knew what to do there. But he really knows what to do in the superheroics and the fantasy scenes. So yeah, and it's nice coloring, beautiful, brilliant cover. I'd love a print of this cover. This may be the best cover of the WTF month, which I guess is now sadly over, because I love the gatefolds. Speaking of finesse and good dialogue and characterization, after reading Superman, it really made me appreciate Justice League Dark. You can tell the difference between the writers who take some time and put some art into what they're doing. So all the characters in here are interesting, from Steve Trevor to Deadman to Constantine to the wonderfully portrayed Frankenstein Agent of Shade, if he still is an Agent of Shade. I'm thinking he's a permanent member of the Justice League Dark. Brilliant art, as you can see here, by Mikel Janin and his finisher, Vincente Cifuentes, or Victor Cifuentes. I'm not sure what his first name is. I can look it up. Vincent Cifuentes. Very hard name to say quickly. Anyway, he and Mikel Janin do a brilliant job. I actually hope Janin will be back on doing his own inks, because I think they're even better. But the art is fabulous. And like I say, by comparison, we get a lot of good characterization. Similar to Superman, the characters are going through kind of weird dreamlike situations where it's hard to tell what's real and what's not. But here, you as a reader, you have a strong sense that this is what's going on, and this is the way we're doing it, and this is the way the person's mind is being screwed with. It's just so much more in focus. There's an appearance. I guess I shouldn't give it away for people who know who he is, who might want to be surprised by the appearance of the villain, who I never heard of. I guess there's lots and lots of holes in my DC knowledge. So I hope in the next issue I will understand a lot about this villain. It was fun, a lot of fun having the Swamp Thing appear. It's a lot of. I really love the sort of doings within the House of Mystery, which is, I don't know if it was in the past, but it's become kind of Constantine's main thing. And so in a way, it's the base, it's the center now of the Justice League Dark, and I really like that. Speaking of the House of Mystery, the last few issues, including this final issue of I, Vampire, take place in the House of Mystery. And I guess it's kind of weird where that fits in time-wise, but who cares really, right? It either happened before or after when the Justice League Dark were having their troubles in the House of Mystery. Certainly big doings there with, I think, this was an enjoyable issue, and it was the final issue, so I'm very sad to see it go, but a lot of stuff didn't fully track for me. Stuff that comes from the last three issues continues on from it. So the last three issues, but particularly this final issue, were a bit of a muddle for me, an enjoyable muddle, but just a lot of finer points that I didn't get. This woman who's coming down from the sky in shining light is the recently killed Mary, Queen of Blood, but she has long hair. I don't know how we're supposed to recognize her. And is she sent down by God? Is that what's going on? I couldn't figure that out. But the issue is shaped nicely by touching back between this final version of Mary, Queen of Blood, and the very beginning of Mary, Queen of Blood. We get scenes when Bennett first confronts her as a vampire, and then when he turns her. So there's a nice artistic finesse there of sort of bookending the whole series. So I end I, Vampire with mixed feelings, and I think I only started I, Vampire at issue 8 or 9. And I haven't gone back to reread the issues I do have. So there may be information I'm missing that ties this whole series together at the end here that would make it make more sense for me. If I ever have enough time, I want to read the entire 20 issue 1 run, because there was a 0 issue. I think in a way we're lucky that it lasted 20 issues. In another way you could look at it, you could say if this had been done as a Vertigo series, it could have been even more true to what it was and perhaps have by Vertigo standards, sold well enough, and it would have had a long life in trades. It's hard to say. I do have the fear that DC's sucked the best stuff out of Vertigo, but then leaves it high and dry, and will cancel it all. I hope I'm wrong, because there's still some good Vertigo-esque books in the DC lineup. The Justice League Dark is kind of the fulcrum, in a way, between the more mainstream and the more weird stories, because it's this superhero team-up of the weird characters. So we'll see. One more book to go. FF number 6. Favorite cover of the month, I think, although there's been so many good covers. And this does not have Michael Allred on it, but they found an artist who captures pretty much the same vibe. He's not as sophisticated as Allred. He does the job in an Allred style without perhaps as much artistic ambition or beautiful moments as Allred brings us. But it works. It still works with this version of Matt Fraction. I'm sort of wondering if there's two versions of Matt Fraction. The Matt Fraction who is the person he really is, which is someone who doesn't take this stuff very seriously and just gives us fun romps. And then the person who tries to be a serious Marvel superhero writer, and it just doesn't click as well for him. He needs the right kind of artist to do this too, to carry off with panache this kind of, I don't even know what to compare it to. In a way it seems retro, but in a way no old comic books would be like this at all, because plot is only half there, and it's all about just the right touch and tone. It's highly enjoyable, yet very minor. These are not major comic books, but they're very good works of art. So it's kind of a funny thing as a reader, but where to place these. But as long as you're just not taking it too seriously, it's great. It's a great, not serious superhero comic book. But it's hardly it's a post-superhero comic book. They hardly do any superheroing. Maybe they will in the next issue. Apparently Blastar from the Negative Zone is going to show up. But they made a big deal about they were going to go after Dr. Doom, and then they let that slide. And another thing is, it's great, but and since these are mostly minor characters, it doesn't matter much, but I don't think Fraction cares at all about their previous characterization. I just noticed that most in the character of Bentley, who had a bit of a character arc in the Hickman run, and now has been stripped of that character and just made this kind of funny joke of the clone of a villain who wants to become a mastermind villain himself, which is the opposite of what Hickman did with him, I think. Anyway, fun stuff. If you aren't reading FF, and you're willing to take your superheroics with a grain of salt, then you should jump on. Just have fun and enjoy it. It might take an issue or two to get into the vibe, but you don't really have to go back to the beginning or anything. So once again, thanks for hanging out with me. Part of me thought I don't have to review everything. I don't review everything or video vlog everything that I read, but I always enjoy it more when I do. I did actually have to do this twice, and I think my energy level was brought down. A lot of you may have seen R. Dowdy kind of taking a break from the community, and the whole troll thing is a problem because you don't want to talk about it too much. But what I think people should realize is that that there's someone out there who is committing what I would call crimes. something akin to identity theft or impersonation or something like that. So hopefully that person will fizzle out and go away. But they are trying to do damage, and that's very uncool. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys, all of you, later. Bye-bye.